Columbo squares off with a doctor as arrogant as Colombo is rumpled. That doctor, Leonard Nimoy. We're not sure, but it might be possible that Columbo, if things go right, could maybe catch him. But will we ever really know? Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. This is Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And this week we're getting to one of the great, maybe the great detective from our era.
Perhaps, yes, Columbo.
Yes.
This is a show I didn't watch at all when I was a kid, so I didn't know how great he was until many, many years later.
I saw it the first time, or my memory of the first time is when I was maybe in junior high. My brother was in high school. Mm-hmm. It was summer. A channel was running reruns like around lunchtime. And I think it was maybe a time where our mom was taking classes or something, so we were kind of on our own. I remember watching them. I'm trying to remember, it's possible they had to run them like in two parts because of the length.
Well, I think they also ran them for a while on as a late night movie, I think on CBS stations for a while. And I think they condensed them into like 1 hour time slots there too. So that seems ridiculous, but I have read that they did edit them down for syndication in some places, so it's possible that you saw like butchered versions of them too.
That could be, yeah. I don't know. I remember a few. One is the one we're going to talk about, and one was a Dick Van Dyke episode, or was he on multiple? The one where he's a photographer.
Yeah, that's the one I remember with Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah. So, and I remember enjoying it. I didn't get the true sort of gimmick of it, mm-hmm. or the heart of it at the time. It was just sort of, oh, it's Colombo. And then when they did the revival, which was not long after that time, I did remember watching some of those, the primetime revival. Was that still on? That was still on ABC.
ABC, yeah.
And then I've seen it here and there since then. I always enjoy it.
Right.
But I think watching some for this, I really, really got into it.
Yeah. I think the first time I discovered Columbo, the way I discovered Columbo was, as with many things with me with pop culture, was through Mad Magazine. I seem to remember either reading a parody of Columbo itself when I was young, and I think this probably happened multiple times, I just have a visual of a Mort Drucker drawn Peter Falk with a trench coat and everything just wandering through and popping up in other parodies of things. I think it might have been like a go-to for them, just commenting and saying, just one more thing or whatever. And so Columbo was kind of, I guess I knew of it, but I don't remember it being on in reruns. And I think I've probably talked about before, as a kid, I wasn't really into procedurals or even that kind of programming very much. So it wouldn't have been something I would have watched. And by the time I was old enough to maybe appreciate that kind of program more, I didn't really have access to it. And it wasn't until this millennium that I started watching it. And once I got into it, it was kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, I've got to see all these now. And I think I've probably seen all the original run, the 1970s NBC run. I definitely have not seen all the ABC ones, but I think I've seen pretty much everything except maybe one or the two of the original TV movies that started it. But there's very few subpar episodes in the 1970s, like the original Columbo. I think they're all great. But as a kid, I just knew him as this eccentric character and kind of something who was parodied and spoofed, but didn't really watch the show until years later.
Yeah, I wonder if he would appeal to kids or not. Like, he might seem too old to appeal to kids, although he's probably our age. Or maybe his weirdness would appeal to kids.
Yeah, I can see maybe the character itself appealing to kids, but the structure of the program, it's rather unique, even for this genre. And to have essentially each episode, it takes maybe 15, 20 minutes for the main character to even show up. And you're seeing people you don't know about. To me, that requires, it sounds a little weird to say this, but it requires a degree of patience from the audience, or like sort of pre-engagement with it. I think it's not necessarily, on one hand, you can tune in anytime and just see Columbo, and as a casual viewer, you can enjoy it. But I think when I was younger, I don't know if I would have appreciated that structure and how it's inverting what other mystery shows do. I might have just tuned in and said, what the heck's going on here? Who are these people? And of course, also being younger, I wouldn't have appreciated the guest stars as much as I do now, when, almost always the murderer is somebody recognizable, somebody interesting.
Right, and even the victims are often recognizable. Like in this case, is probably then more recognizable than now. But it's that whole flipping of it is of course one of the unique things. That, okay, the audience knows who did it,
Right.
and how they did it, and then it's just about sort of the cat and mouse game and Columbo, seeing how Columbo puts it together.
Mm-hmm. In that sense, it's a little bit more of a cerebral show, too. Like, say something like Starsky and Hutch, which I remember being on reruns. That had action, car chases, colorful characters. But Columbo is basically a series of conversations between Columbo and, the suspect or the murderer. There's not a whole lot of action. You sort of see, you'll see an intricate murder sequence maybe at the beginning of the episode. And those are fun to watch and see how they set things up. But to me, that's almost it's more like Mission Impossible or something like that at the beginning. And then you're getting, a lot of, dialogue and cool characterization, but not a lot of action. And I remember when I was a kid, I didn't really get into Mission Impossible either for some reason. And now that's a show I appreciate a lot more now, seeing how things unfold. And part of it is you're seeing an intricate plot go into play. It's very plot heavy. Mission Impossible with almost no characterization. And that's something I didn't appreciate when I was younger either. And now I think that and Columbo, I'm not sure if those are directly comparable, even though I'm trying to do it now. But again, I guess I can sort of understand. I forgive myself for not watching Columbo more when I was younger, but I think I missed out on a lot of stuff because it's a great show.
Yeah, but maybe it just wouldn't have clicked. So
I don't think so, yeah.
And you've seen it since. So well, I forgive you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
That's what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating too. So I watched the episode we're going to talk about, and a couple of Dick Van Dyke one and the Shatner one. And in all three cases, at least of those, I think the guest stars were on the one hand playing against type by being murderers, but on the other hand, it seemed that the creators were using, what those people were known for as part of the description of them. Right. So, or the portrayal. So Dick Van Dyke, he's not likable in that at all. Even in the brief moment at the beginning before he kills his wife, where she's being terrible. Mm-hmm. Even then, he's not that likable. But he's still using his comedic chops all through the episode in his sort of reactions to Columbo, and he's doing, very Dick Van Dyke double takes. And one of my favorite bits, Columbo's interviewing him while he's having a bullet taken out of his leg. And every now and then he'll be in the middle of answering a question, and then they'll do something and he'll sort of wince, but it'll be in a Dick Van Dyke way with like a little gulp and just kind of a turn, that the quick way Dick Van Dyke turns his head for a double take.
Yeah.
There's something great about that. And the Shatner one, he's playing an egotistical actor.
Yeah.
The role he was born to play.
Yeah. Indeed.
So I like that. But then I have the question of pondering today. I wonder what the process of that show was. Did they cast guest stars and then write a script for them? Or did they kind of come up with an idea and maybe tweak the script based on who they cast? Or is it just the actors bringing that with them? And then the other part is, as a writer that intrigues me, since the show starts with the murder, is that how, did the writers start with an idea, we're going to have a doctor commit a murder, and then figure out, well, what kind of murder how would a doctor commit murder as a doctor?
Right.
And then be like, well, he's a surgeon, so he's going to be arrogant. Mm-hmm. And then, well, who would be good at playing sort of arrogant and confident and emotionally cool? Mm-hmm. The person we're going to talk about, Leonard Nimoy. Perfect. It's a chicken and egg thing. And I'm sure there's maybe a book or something that answers that question, but it's just intriguing to me. Or did they, it's possible they sort of wrote the murder last, had Columbo figure it out as they wrote, or came up with the story, and then went back and wrote the murder to fit what he put together.
I'm not sure about as far as writing around the guest star. That's an excellent question. From what I understand, I think they would start with a premise and come up with a murder and work backwards from there because of the way the show was structured. And I also think that part of it was finding a unique situation and an occupation. I do think that was part of it, where they would say, okay, here's a writer. Let's build it around that. And I think there were. It seems to me probably getting some of these guest stars was an important part of the process, but I think there's maybe a couple different kind of murderers. You have the unlikable murderer, and the episode we're going to talk about today is a great example of that. But many of the episodes, they have Columbo almost seems sympathetic to the murderer and almost befriends them in a way and sort of enjoys the process. And I think in those episodes, it's helpful to have an engaging actor, guest star, that can be sort of not totally hated by the audience, even though they've committed murder. And I guess there's also it seems like a lot of the murders, some of them are more cold-blooded than others. Right. So have a couple different dynamics going on, but it seems like the show itself took great pains at constructing the mysteries, playing fair. And in this show, when you see how it's done, it's not like you can withhold everything from the audience. But I think it's interesting that they did that. They showed you, but they managed to come up with suspense and always work up to that gotcha moment where Colombo reveals what it was that they slipped up. So I think it's a great writing achievement. I mean, in addition to the great performance of Peter Falk and the acting and a given episode like we can talk about today, but just as an exercise in writing, they did a remarkable job in doing these.
Yeah, you're right. Putting that all together and keeping you interested despite the fact that you know the answer. It's all about, it's the writing, but it is him too. Mm-hmm. He, like a sort of, rote detective character wouldn't be that interesting. Like, there's no offense to anyone who played that kind of, like especially like a second banana kind of cop that on a show, like like Kojak or something, like Kojak's interesting, of course, because he's Kojak, baby. But some of the guys, they're fine, they're good actors and everything, but you wouldn't want to watch a show where they already know. Yeah. You already know who did it.
Right.
Whereas Columbo, it's like part of it's the layers of that character too. It's like, well, okay, when is he putting on a show? When is he just being honestly weird? What's going on there, and what is the little piece, the little thing that's going to set him off that really sets him down the path?
Yeah, I think you can watch it different ways. I think generally you'd probably accept that he almost always has a pretty good idea early on who did it, and then he's just kind of playing dumb. But even if you watch it and you think, well, he doesn't really know yet, and he's just stumbling on, especially like in the beginning of an episode when he first meets like the murderer, you can play it either way. You can think, well, he already knows, but it's equally entertaining either way. Either he's actually stumbling through it to some degree, or he's already putting on this brilliant act, and a lot of times people call him out on that, especially like later in the episodes and things like that. And that's entertaining too. So there's definitely so much going on with his performance. And one thing I want to mention too is that we're talking about the Leonard Nimoy episode, but I think a lot of Columbo fans, I think maybe on the list of favorite Columbo villains would be people that were on multiple times. I think Patrick McGowan was on a couple episodes. Jack Cassidy was in some of the most well-remembered episodes, and Robert Culp, who was in, I think, maybe 3 or 4 episodes. And they were all great. And that was interesting. A case like that might be a way we could find out about your question about how they would deal with the guest stars, because Culp came back multiple times playing a different character, but each time. But it just seems like, I like Robert Culp, but it seems like, okay, I can see him. I don't know if I can see him being a great villain on the show because I've seen it already, or because I can't separate the two. But it just seems like, okay, I can see him doing this and just being like having just enough arrogance to think he could get away with this and everything.
But being irascibly charming the whole time.
Yes. And Jack Cassidy is, I think, just considered kind of a rogue to begin with. And I think in his episodes, he's pretty much doing that. He's not necessarily the most sympathetic character. He's maybe sympathetic in the sense that he's got that charm to him, that roguish kind of charm. But it's interesting, like, and Shatner came back in the 90s version too. But there were only, I think, like 69 or 70 episodes total. So there wasn't a lot of room to bring back actors multiple times. And part of the reason there's so few episodes for a show that was on so long, and I think this is something that would point probably to the quality of each episode, was it rotated with other shows. So they weren't having to crank one of these out every week, right? So I'm sure that gave them more time, and they were able to put more care into each individual episode. And the production of each Columbo was probably proportionately better because they didn't have to do 30 of these a year or whatever.
And what were the other shows in rotation again?
Well, it started off as the NBC mystery movie, and I believe at the beginning it was McMillan and Wife and McCloud. McCloud with Dennis Weaver. McMillan and Wife had Rock Hudson and Susan St. James. And later NBC spun it off, made another, like a Wednesday movie. They put shows in like Banachek. The Snoop Sisters, I think, was in that. And Quincy started out under that, and then became its own show. But I think Columbo was the most successful of all those. But when NBC started this mystery movie, this wheel concept with rotating series, they were all doing very well. McMillan and Wife was popular, McCloud was popular, and of course Columbo was popular. And that was a way you could have to produce less episodes, get the stars locked in for shorter commitments and make it easier for them. And it just seemed to work very well all around.
And what's the deal with Mrs. Colombo?
Mrs. Colombo, I think, from what I've read, who's responsible for Mrs. Colombo? Apparently the final say was Fred Silverman. Levinson and Link were the creators of Columbo, and they were opposed to a spinoff. Mrs. Colombo, Columbo's wife, often named and referred to, never seen on the actual Columbo show. I think to the point where maybe some people might even speculate as to whether she's real, although there's some episodes where you see tangible evidence of her. But at some point, there's some episodes that there's some inconsistencies and everything. There's some ambiguity there, okay? And she's never named, I don't think. But NBC had the rights, I guess, to use the Columbo name, and they created this series for Kate Mulgrew called Mrs. Colombo, and it wasn't officially a spinoff. I think there were hints, but they never outright said, okay, I'm married to Lieutenant Colombo, but they had her, she was a reporter or something like that, and she solved mysteries that way. So I think it's unofficial, and they didn't have concrete evidence that she was married to the Colombo that we knew and loved. But there was a lot of like wink wink nods. I think like you'd see like little references here. I think maybe the dog was there or something, and the Colombo's car you could see in the background or something like that. So, but it was Fred Silverman that said, okay, let's just use the Colombo name and we're going to make her Mrs. Colombo, is what I read, that he made the final decision to go ahead with that.
Kate Mulgrew seems a little young at the time to be his wife, but maybe I'm wrong about her age.
Yeah.
It seems like that, and I don't know what that was was that in the 80s or is that in
late
the
70s?
Late 70s?
Yeah.
Okay. It just seems like she would have been in her late 20s or something, maybe. And again, I don't know how old
Peter Falk was not in his late 20s.
I mean, he was in his 80s when he died, right?
Right. So, I mean, he was on TV like in the late 50s and in the 60s and acting already then. So, yeah, he seems to I think he's playing the character, I think is playing like early 40s maybe. Wow. I'm saying that out loud. I'm thinking, I'm not going to pursue that anymore, but that's kind of hit me a little bit when I say it out loud like that. But
yeah, in my mind, he's like 50-ish, but again, it's the same thing. It's like, it's getting close.
Yeah.
Because he still seems older. Because I think he's Peter Falk, so he's all craggy and rumply and Peter Falky. I just don't want to believe it. And I wonder too. Now, I think I had this thought recently. If you see if you get to know a character when you're younger than them, do they just always? Is your perception of them always that they're older?
I think so. Yeah, definitely the case with me.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, because we've talked about that before. Like Ed Asner was around our age and Mary Tyler Moore. It's like,
right.
No, he's Ed Asner. He's always older.
Right.
And Columbo was on the original run. How many seasons?
I think 6 or 7 seasons. Yeah, it was started in 1971 after the 2 pilot movies, and then it lasts until 1978. And I think 7 seasons for the original run, and about 45 total episodes. And then they brought it back in 1989 on ABC, a different network.
And if I remember correctly, it was introduced in a stage play first.
Yeah.
And that was adapted into one of the pilots.
Yeah, years earlier, there was even a different actor, like a character actor, Bert Freed, played Columbo on TV years before this, I think maybe 10 years before. I think there was an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents or Alfred Hitchcock Hour that technically had the character. But of course, Peter Falk made the character his own, with his own characterization and everything.
So should we get into this episode? I mean, there's a lot to cover in it.
Yeah, I think it's a great episode worth talking about. The episode, I don't know if we've mentioned the name of it yet, Stitch and Crime, which was the season 6 opener of Columbo. And that was, it debuted October 10th, 1976, which was a Sunday. And I think earlier I mentioned NBC sort of trying to spin off. The mystery movie concept actually started on Wednesday, then moved to Sunday. And then after it was established on Sunday, then they tried to establish another beachhead with the Wednesdays. But Columbo was mostly a Sunday night show, and this episode was a Sunday night show as well.
Not that I don't trust you, and not that I entirely trust the source, but the Amazon/IMDb TV said February 10th, 1973 for this episode.
That's my mistake. I think you know what I did? I think I looked up the Fate and the Shatner one, which is why I confused myself.
Well, you were only 3 years in.
But it was a Sunday night. It was a
months.
Sunday night episode.
Okay.
All right, so let's scrap that.
By the way, we mentioned it briefly, but that Shatner episode is amazing. If you like Shatner, even if you never want to see another Columbo episode, you got to watch that episode.
Almost every minute of it is enjoyable, and I think if we hadn't talked about William Shatner so recently in our last season, it would have been a great episode to talk about.
Yeah, and very different from this one. He's one of the sympathetic killers, I think. In fact,
somehow he is.
Yes, he says at the end.
Yeah.
He at least approaches the idea that he's sympathetic.
I think in part of it, the approach he plays is almost to the end, trying to ingratiate himself with Colombo, and he's a TV detective, as you mentioned, and almost trying to join forces with him and be friends with him and trying to be sympathetic almost to the end.
Yes, and lead Colombo directly to
Yes.
But he's one of those people who sees right through Columbo's shenanigans too.
And he's quite proud of himself for doing it too. And actually, there was a moment in that episode where he hands something to Colombo and he just gives him a little wink, like it's like a piece of evidence or something like that. And he's handing it to him, and he just it's almost subtle. I mean, it's Shatner, but it's subtle. But he gives him a little wink, and somebody else is talking and stuff. And I just love that thing. He's just doing all these little things to make it seem like him and Colombo are pals and stuff like that. And
their colleagues.
And he's actually like trying to solve the case with him, and he gives that impression that he's trying to. And well, I guess he is in a way. He's trying to get Colombo to solve the case the way he wants it to, but
he knows he's going to get caught. He just wants it to be sympathetic.
Yeah. Now, I can't help but wonder if Shatner got the script and counted the number of lines he got compared to the number of lines Leonard Nimoy got in his episode. And maybe there is some element of him wanting to best Leonard Nimoy in his villain portrayal, but it's another great episode for sure.
Yeah. Nimoy had to do a lot of non-verbal acting.
Oh, he certainly did, yes.
Especially in the beginning of in the murder part of this. Yeah, and so the guests include him, Anne Francis from Forbidden Planet. And
Honey West, and had been acting for probably 10, 15 years at this point.
And Will Geer, returning to BOTNS from the Waltons, of course, Grandpa from the Waltons, and Nita Talbot, who I'm not too familiar with, but she was really funny. Mm-hmm. And a few other people, but those are the main characters.
A really good cast, and almost each one of the people you mentioned make good impressions. And Jared Martin plays Harry, who I guess we'll talk about. Harry is an acquaintance of Anne Francis's character. Well, more than acquaintance. They had been involved at one point, and he has kind of a memorable role and is one of the victims in this episode.
Yeah, I'm still not sure if he died or not.
I read an episode summary that seemed to be pretty clear on the fact that he died, although I don't think they say it explicitly in the episode. But I kind of assumed that he was dead, but I was also waiting to hear confirmation from Colombo that he was dead, and I didn't get it. But I'm going to go ahead and add him to the body count.
Okay. I did, in my mind. He looked dead like twice. So
yeah.
Yeah, so at the beginning, Will Geer, who's playing Dr. Heidemann, gets rushed to the hospital. He's got chest pains, some sort of cardiac event going on. But of course, he's an old crusty doctor. And while they're getting his room ready, he goes wandering down to his office, his lab. And,
oh, don't worry about me. I'll be fine.
And there's Anne Francis playing a nurse, Sharon
Martin.
And you can tell they have a close relationship. And then we meet Nimoy, who's, before Heidemann comes in, he's reading a telegram, not for him. It's a little mysterious, but it's in the mode of old movies and old TV. It hangs up on the screen for a nice long time.
Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, so you can read it all. And
very thoughtful of the director of photography to and the editor to let us see that whole telegram.
A nice insert shot. Unfortunately, it didn't have the thing like in Three Stooges where there's like an audible cut.
Yeah, right.
But
so he's reading a telegram. But let me ask you this: is it a crime to read somebody else's telegram?
Well, telegrams don't come by mail, do they? So
well, there you go.
Maybe not.
I don't think it is.
Yeah,
it is relevant to something that he's working on. Yeah. He's invested in this research project, so he could have handled it a little bit better, perhaps. But yes, he's interested in what's going on. Wants to know, be in the loop.
Right, and so some other doctor wants them to compare notes.
Yeah,
that's the gist of it. And then we learn a little more, which is that they're working on medicine to help with organ transplant to stop rejection.
Right.
That's kind of cool because that's a thing that someone eventually figured out.
Yeah.
That's a time capsule element there. And Dr. Heidemann is, he wants to be patient. He wants to make sure it's ready before they jump ahead.
Yeah. Things like science and ethics and caution, restraint.
But Nimoy is Dr. Mayfield, hot to trot, one might say, to get this going, and he's ambitious.
Certainly is.
I mean, he's not. Of course, he's Leonard Nimoy, so he's not expressing it in anger, but you can tell he's irritated.
Yes, and I think doesn't Dr. Heidemann sort of say to him that he's anxious not to get it. He's anxious to get the credit. He's worried that this other team, this other doctor will come across, will get credit by beating them to the punch with this. And Barry Mayfield, aka Nimoy, kind of raises an eyebrow, and
wait,
he doesn't.
Nimoy raises an eyebrow.
Yeah. He reaches deep into his actorly bag of tricks and pulls out something he hadn't done probably in years.
And then Sharon comes in, and that's Nimoy finds out why Heideman's there, and it's like, oh, we need to replace your valve tonight or today. For some reason, it seemed like night, but I don't think it was.
Yeah.
And so he's going to do the surgery, and in the prep for the surgery, she expresses some concern. She doesn't like him, and she expresses it to Heidemann. She just thinks he's up to something. And she knows he's ambitious, and Heidemann is just, I mean, I like him. I like his sort of patience with everything, and he's kind of like, well, you know, you have to put up with that, with, as George Costanza would say, delicate geniuses.
Yeah. Yeah, the character suffers a bit from the fact that we know what Nimoy's up to. So in retrospect, he kind of looks a little naive because he really doesn't listen to her concerns at all. And for a nurse, especially before a major procedure, she's pretty bold about saying some of this stuff. Now, I would also think that, I don't know how this works. I've never worked as a surgeon or in a major hospital.
What?
But no, I haven't, believe it or not. I have watched a lot of television, though. And on television, you don't have these kind of boundaries, I guess, unless it's convenient. But it doesn't seem kind of weird that two people to be working that closely together, that Nimoy would be doing the operation.
That does seem a little strange, but maybe, you know, doctors that they know, because they work together, they know who to trust.
Yeah.
And he knows that he's a brilliant surgeon.
Yes. He thinks he can trust him, and he definitely dismisses Anne Frances's concern. You know, he says something like, "Oh, I know you don't like him very much, but he's good at what he does, and I don't care if he's trying to kill me." He doesn't say quite like that, but
I thought he said it exactly like that.
Okay, yeah.
I know he's a homicidal maniac,
Yeah.
but
Oh, he may be a little homicidal, but he's a good surgeon.
when I was a country doctor, doctors murdered each other all the time. It's just how we did it on Walton Mountain.
Yes.
But then when we go into the surgery, and now this is a thing. Well, I guess maybe that's normal for them. Some of the murders. Well, it's not the murder, but we know he's up to something. Mm-hmm. But until the end, it's a little unclear what he did.
Right.
But she's watching him with great suspicion and maybe paranoia even. And the editing on this is great. All these really fast cuts.
Yeah.
Intense music and things.
I'm glad you mentioned that. The music is great in this episode in general, and the editing is good. And remember, this is years before like ER or something, and I guess Medical Center was on around this time. You had medical shows like Ben Casey and Dr. Kildare in the 60s, but it wasn't at all standard to have a like super tense surgery scene in every medical show like this. So this was, this is pretty well done, especially for the time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess MASH was having some maybe intense surgery scenes with jokes.
Yes.
And I did laugh a few times. It reminded me of all, like, Muppet Hospital or whatever. Just,
wow.
Just the scalpel, sponge.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Well, and it's interesting, too. Well, there's the one character, was it Charlie? He seems like ask him, I guess it was probably only twice, but he's like, "How's the pressure, Charlie? What's the pressure, Charlie?" It was like, it almost felt like, "What's the frequency, Kenneth?" It seemed like, what's Nimoy on about, He asked like several times if the pressure's okay. Is the pressure okay? Charlie, is the pressure okay? And then Sharon, the nurse, she's actually the one that seems incompetent because she's so distracted that he has to ask her a couple times, like, "Scalpel, I said scalpel. Suture, I said suture. What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
She's like totally distracted, and actually she's not doing her job very well. Perhaps because of her hesitancy or something, but or maybe she notices something earlier, she's looking for something, but if you take everything at face value, she's off her game, and you don't want to have, your surgeon in that situation have to repeat himself a couple times.
Right. And, I understand her being suspicious of him in general, but it is a fairly big leap to go, oh, he's going to murder her.
Yeah.
Yep.
In front of other people, in front of Charlie, for crying out loud, dude.
Right.
Charlie's the most honest soul you'll ever see. And
you know Charlie well.
Oh, I do know. I feel like I know Charlie. Charlie was right on top of that pressure situation, that systolic pressure. He was all over it.
That's important in that kind of surgery.
But it's very eyebrow raising, I dare say, for Sharon to be making these concerns, like you say, in this situation. It would be very bold of him to do so. I mean, it would destroy his whole career, in addition to putting him in jail. But the research thing, and it's an interesting scene. I mean, I don't mean to come down too hard on Sharon because she's absolutely right, as it turns out. But there's a very interesting dynamic in that OR scene.
Yeah. And then afterwards, she leans down to pick up something, and it's some suture. And it's great, too, the way they shoot that, because Nimoy's watching her in the mirror as he, washes his hands and knots his tie. And
Right.
all of that. And then she goes and she makes a phone call, and he listens in on the phone call, and she writes down Mac 8 a.m. Tuesday or something. And we don't know what that means, and we only hear her side of the phone call, which is very generic. But he hears it, so he knows what's up. And then she goes to a parking garage, and at that point, you know she's going to die.
Yeah.
Because it's a parking garage.
And it's shot like a horror movie or like a slasher film almost.
It's true, because she turns around and she sees him, and he's just standing there being very still but menacing. And then her eyes widen, and he raises the tire iron.
Yes.
And he's got very specific leather gloves on, which Dick Van Dyke had like driving gloves on.
Yeah.
And all his, which I understood why he did, but you'd think a doctor would have access to some rubber gloves.
Yeah. Well, a friend of the show, Lori, called them murder gloves. So he's got some pretty spiffy murder gloves. And he did.
Yeah, they look nice. Designer gloves, I guess. You know, he's a fashionable guy. When we see him in his street clothes, he's later at his party.
Yeah.
He's, you know, Leonard brought over some of his in search of fashions.
I think so. Yeah, right.
So yeah, maybe this is what you need to look good when you're going to murder someone.
And he does. And the actual striking of her, it's shot like that too. I think it's like from her perspective, but it's kind of like goes to you just sort of see him start to come down with the weapon.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like a cut. But it's very well done. It's eerie and unsettling as it should be.
Right. And then he takes her keys and kind of rifles through her purse and finds a suture. I thought he was making it look like a robbery, but then he doesn't really do. That's not the main.
No. Which is interesting because then he has like another goal later. I guess one of his main goals is getting her apartment key.
Yeah.
And then when he goes over there, then he makes more of a chaotic scene, I guess.
Right, yeah. He goes over there in the morning, watches her roommate leave, and then goes in and he just tears up the place.
Yeah, and it's the way he does it. I love this scene because he's doing it like in a controlled way. Like we know that he's doing it deliberately to make it seem like disorder, but just the way he do it, like backhanding things, and he's sort of like looking intently, and that whole cool and collected demeanor is evident even when he's going through her house destroying stuff, and that makes it again kind of disturbing. And Nimoy is great this whole time too. He's not. Everything seems to be calculated, including this part of creating apparent chaos in the apartment.
Yeah, but he's putting it all together on the fly too. Mm-hmm. He definitely is a delicate genius. To be able to perform surgery and improvise a murder and a frame up.
Right. And I think he does a very good job in a lot of this, like when he's listening in to like her phone call and everything, like his facial expressions and everything, again, revealing things to us without revealing too much, but just you sort of see like the wheels turning. I mean, I think he's doing a good job of showing us thinking and letting us know that he's aware without making it obvious to the people around him in the scene.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big keys to this whole performance by him is Barry Mayfield, which I love that name for some reason. But
that is a good name, Barry Mayfield.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily think of it as a doctor, but once you put doctor in front of it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but...
Dr. Barry Mayfield.
And by this point, also, Colombo has finally arrived on the murder scene. And classic Colombo, he's worn out. He didn't sleep all night because Mrs. Colombo had some sort of stomach problems. And he's trying to crack a hard-boiled egg on the victim's car.
Yes.
And someone has to admonish him for this.
Yes, the very definition of rumpled. He hasn't gotten much sleep. He seems half out of it. He's doing a running monologue to everybody around him about all this too, which is great.
Right, yeah. Colombo seems to have no filters.
Exactly, yeah.
And then we see Nimoy back in his office. Excuse me, Dr. Barry Mayfield. You know, he's in the middle of finding out what happened.
Yeah.
When Colombo walks in.
I think he makes a call, right? He's like, and then somebody tells him that things have been, the schedule at the hospital has been altered. And then you get to see him react, oh, really? You know, and sort of putting on faux concern until Colombo gets in the room because nobody else sees him.
Right. And now we should go back. When he's in Sharon's apartment, he plants a couple bottles of morphine. Mm-hmm. So that'll be important later.
Yeah.
So Colombo's watching him do this. And then it seemed to me that as soon as Mayfield met Colombo, he disliked him. I mean, later he's more sort of charming with him, but his initial reaction is just like his arrogance is just like, "Who are you? What is this wrinkled thing before me?"
You're saying Nimoy doesn't like Colombo?
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Right.
And now that goes back to that question, like when does Colombo know and stuff? And I mean, I feel like Columbo must have just like a good radar about people.
Yeah, he's very intuitive. And in this scene, at the end of their exchange, Columbo even mentions something, kind of giving credence to the idea of like maybe he knows exactly. Because not only does he say it, he makes this observation, but he calls him. Well, I shouldn't say calls him, but he points it out to him. He says, "Boy, you must be a brilliant surgeon. Like, oh, you know what? Because you can concentrate. Like, you just got this horrible news, and you were adjusting his desk clock, while you heard the news." And he's saying like, well, Columbo's reasoning is it must take incredible concentration to be able to compartmentalize that, which I think Mayfield says something like, well, it must have just been a reflex. I don't remember doing it or something.
Yeah. I like that, how the killers are always trying to dismiss Columbo's ideas as dumb.
Yeah.
And sometimes Columbo like sets them up that way. He's like, that's a ridiculous idea, but you know.
Right. But in his very first encounter, he's picked up on something, and you could read it both ways. It's possible that Columbo doesn't think anything of it, but you can bet he's going to file it away. And he does. Like, he remembers that.
He also... One, there's like a running thing where he needs coffee, and there isn't any. Like we're walking out of the hall, and he's like, "Is there a coffee machine on this floor?" No.
Yeah.
It's just
and that's it. Just a flat no.
Right. And then
that was great.
Also, like a whole thing about it that hospitals make him queasy.
Oh yes.
I don't know. You know, it's Columbo. Is it true? Is it not?
Yeah.
I don't, because at the end it seems like maybe it's not true. That's one of his.
He does a pretty good job of making it look like it, though. And then there's a later scene where he seems like he's genuinely upset by, seeing surgery and everything.
Right. Yeah.
But I liked it. He asked him like, "Is there anything I can take for that, or anything I can do?" And Nimoy's like, "Well, there's one thing you can do, of course, is try to stay out of hospitals as much as possible." Oh yeah.
Right. And then there's a great scene between Mayfield and Heidemann where, they're just talking about his recovery and everything. And then he asks, how soon will there be a change for him? And Mayfield's, a few days. I'd say a few days.
Yeah.
And then Columbo's talking to the roommate, played by
Nita Talbot.
Yeah, Marcia. And that's a great scene, too, because she just keeps going on and on about herself and all this sort of weird self-analyzation and how Sharon was such a better person than her, and she's just a plastic surgery nurse in this, and Columbo is, it's, overwhelming him.
Yeah. He becomes even more weary just by listening to her and interacting with her. And he's trying to be patient, but he's also kind of trying to direct her to talking about the actual victim.
Yeah. And then they find the morphine because they're searching the apartment while he's talking. And so, that's strange.
It begs the question, is Sharon a hophead?
I wish someone had said that.
Yeah.
That exact phrase.
Yeah.
Like Nimoy, this begs the question, was Sharon a hophead?
Yeah. We may never know, but at some point in the future, there may be some evidence which may indicate that on some level, Sharon was perhaps, at least partially, a hophead to some degree.
Or perhaps a hop dealer.
Yeah, that seems to be the working theory.
A junk woman.
Yeah, peddling dope.
Yes. Then we see this really swank party that Nimoy's throwing.
Great party, by the way.
It seems like it's full of doctors and nurses and
yeah,
because everybody's talking about sort of medical stuff.
A lot of shop talk, yeah.
This great house in one of the sets of hills in L.A.
Yeah.
with a great view and
quite a place.
Pool, yeah,
got a pool.
Being a doctor pays.
Yeah, and I think one you'd hear just at the end, but there's 3 different and totally distinct types of music you hear throughout the party. I like that. It's like, wow, what a great mix DJ Mayfield's got going. He's got some more sedate, proper music. Then he's got a kind of early 70s network TV idea of funky music playing, and it's good stuff. Got hors d'oeuvres all over the place.
Yeah, and Columbo just wanders into this party.
Yeah,
that's great too. They're showing the party and kind of just going through it and everything, and you can see Mayfield's being all suave, and then there's a shot of Columbo's crappy car coming up the hill, and I'm here he comes.
Yeah, and something that we haven't talked about explicitly yet is, in many of these episodes, there's an obvious distinction between Columbo and, lower middle class and upper class. A lot of these murders take place among the upper crust. I mean, in this case, the murder victim, she's not upper class. But by this party proves that Mayfield, he's got some money, and it kind of establishes him as maybe more of an elitist in a way that maybe his pants don't necessarily indicate that. But I think the fact that he has, and she's got a Swedish accent or something, the maid, and just the fact that he either has or hired some Swedish maid for the party, don't you get the impression that he did that for appearances maybe?
Yeah.
He felt he had to, or he felt it was it was trendy.
And is she a maid? Is she a caterer? I mean, because there were a couple of people walking around like that.
Right.
Yeah. He's got some checked pants and a turtleneck.
Yeah.
And, maybe this came up before, maybe with In Search Of, but I think Leonard Nimoy, he's someone that a turtleneck works on.
Yeah.
Like, I myself I don't want to wear a turtleneck. I don't like turtlenecks.
Right.
But I think people with that sort of slight build, it kind of works. He looks cool.
Yeah.
In his way. and his hair, of course, is a little bit longer. It's not a Spock haircut. And helps create some distance. And yet, I could see Spock wearing a turtleneck if it were logical.
I think it might well be logical, yes. Doesn't he wear maybe it's like a fisherman's sweater or something when he goes back in time in the Joan Collins episode in The City on the Edge of Forever?
I think,
he's on Earth, and I think he's wearing, I have to look into that.
But, Colombo comes in and the Swedish waitress or maid offers him some fancy salmon caviar thing.
Yeah, with a lot going on, like salmon and caviar. I think you're right, and cream cheese or something. And
he's like, "You have something with just cheese?"
Yeah.
She points him in the direction of the buffet table, and then he's there, George Costanza style, just loading up his plate.
Oh, totally. It's like me at the Golden Corral or something, man. He's going to town on it. And what I love too is when Nimoy comes over, he kind of says "Oh, I think he says your maid or whatever." She really practically insisted. And it's well, she kind of said you could help yourself, but she didn't necessarily tell you to pile up a stack of food.
And then they go sit out by the pool to talk, and it's great for the character, but it's also actor stuff, doing business. He's just shoveling it in while they're talking.
Right. It is. And we kind of get the thing going on here with many of these, as you mentioned, the character, the doctor seems annoyed by Colombo at first, but it's almost like a lot of times when Colombo comes back and talks to them again and they know that something's up, they start trying to be friendly and going out of their way to be easygoing and try to hide the fact that they might be disgusted with him.
Right. Which I bet he was disgusted with the kind he's eating.
Right. Very gauche.
But Colombo gives him a lot of information. Yeah, it mentions the morphine and thinks the apartment is torn up looking for it. He mentions the note, or shows him the note with the Mac.
Yeah.
And then after shoveling in all his food, he asks for something for an upset stomach.
Yeah.
Which I thought was for his wife, but it's not. It's for him this time.
Yeah, sometimes when I eat too fast, he says. And, though, there's something interesting about Colombo's technique. He does this a lot. And it almost, again, as far as the debate about how early he locks into somebody, he gives the killer a lot of information that only the killer might know. He gives him evidence and glimpses of things that would help. I guess you can say that Colombo likes the fact that he likes to have them try to cover this stuff up. It helps them expose themselves. But by showing him, the note and everything and telling him about what they found in her apartment, it's an interesting way to go about solving a crime, to take a suspect or somebody and give them information that a lot of times police would withhold from the general public.
Right. Yeah.
Let alone somebody that might be a suspect.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's really part of his routine, because he'll say, there's one thing that's been bothering me about this, and he'll poke holes in the murderer's theories by revealing evidence that contradicts that theory.
And he's carrying around evidence in his pocket.
Yeah.
Right. Not in a bag or anything. It's just folded up in his pocket.
One other thing I want to point out, because I thought it was amusing when we watched it, was Mayfield actually addresses the fact that he's having this party. He says, "You know what? I thought about calling off this party, but it was just too late." And that's kind of all he says. And Colombo says something like, "Oh, yeah, I understand that," because it is kind of funny that he's having this big swank party right after this murder by, this nurse that he knew pretty well.
I bet she wasn't even invited.
Yeah, probably not. But it seems, and the other thing is, which we'll get to, he seems to know the roommate pretty well, too.
Yeah, they didn't really explain that.
There was, they don't, but he had more than a passing acquaintance with her as well. So it seemed bizarre that he went through with this party. But you know what? Why should everybody else suffer, I guess, just because of this murder? They probably love going to Barry's parties.
There's no party like a Mayfield party.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I guess that's, he wanted to think of very generous of him to go through and give everybody a chance to celebrate and enjoy themselves rather than dwell on the tragic murder.
And, doctors, they're used to death. It's just part of the game for them.
That's a good point.
So as soon as Colombo leaves, he calls Marcia and asks her to go for a walk to talk about things. And there's sort of this semi-montage of beach scenes and stuff. And
yeah.
Which is an interesting flourish. And then they're taking a walk on a pier, and he's added to his ensemble this striped jacket, vertical striped jacket. I guess that's how, but it's blue and white and red. It's very of its time. And he's he's looking cool in it.
Yeah, he looks quite good, and things like vertical stripes. Again, you got to have a certain build to pull that off, and he does. So credit to him. And it's a very interesting conversation they have. But I just enjoyed this so much. It's totally transparent what he's doing, but it's not goofy. It's not goofy. But he's trying to plant in her head the idea that this guy named Harry did it, but he wants it to seem like it came up as her idea. And he actually does sort of a pretty good job of doing that. So he gets her to say this name, like when he's suggesting, if there's only anybody she knew or anything like that, and they come up with this guy Harry that she knew from working with like a local clinic, right? And then he kind of says, "Oh, you've hit on something there," and giving her credit for it and saying that she should contact the police. And it's so funny because we know just what a slime he is and him doing it. But he would have gotten away with it if Colombo weren't so sharp and weren't able to kind of suss out the fact that it wasn't her, that he did put the idea in her head.
And of course she thinks it's about. She thinks he called her because he's interested in her.
Yeah,
and she's disappointed when he just drops her off.
Yeah, like, what do we do now? Well, I think you should go home. Oh, like what a great move that would be. A sly move to like, okay, now that your roommate's murdered, you got a lot of extra space in that place now. Why don't we get together? That's the perfect time to hit on someone. It's when their roommate has been murdered the day before.
Well, it makes you realize that she's very self-aware.
Yeah.
She knows that she's a selfish person.
Yeah, and she had mentioned earlier in that first scene, right, that she doesn't meet a lot of single guys, or the only single guys she meets are older guys. I forget how she puts it.
Patience.
Right, they need a facelift.
Yeah, and when he drops her off, like, Columbo's waiting in the bushes.
Yeah.
And then he's sneezing because... and acting like, oh, where did this come from? And like,
yeah.
Well, you were standing in some bushes.
You're right. But the sneeze, whether legit or not, and I guess you got to be pretty confident to fake a series of sneezes, but it gives him the opportunity to ingratiate himself with her because she happens to have a homemade remedy for this.
Yeah, I wonder if that works.
Yeah, I don't know. It
involved sipping water, I think 6 times.
Yeah, like 6 or 7 times, and then you pause, and then you exhale, I think. You
so,
take a deep breath, and he does it.
And boy, it worked.
Yeah. And he lets that moment breathe a little bit, like, and enjoy it. And I was kind of thinking, this is pretty good. He's like really getting her comfortable because she, did this thing for him, and he's showing what appears to be, and probably is, genuine gratitude if he was really, really sneezing. And I mean, it's funny just what masterminds we think Columbo is, because we see him as so like super intelligent throughout the course of the series that like I'm entertaining the possibility that he's faking the sneeze in order to get, to ingratiate himself with her, even though that would be quite a coincidence.
I'm pretty sure he's just allergic to whatever bush he was standing in.
That could be.
But then that's his genius. He's able to use his ailments and things to his advantage.
Well, even if he doesn't know that she has like that particular remedy, a lot of times if you're sneezing, people, especially in kind of a nursing field, would be compelled to like help you or at least offer you a tissue. And he probably would have done something with that, like, oh, these are the best tissues, so soft and.
Where do you get tissues like this?
Mrs. Colombo, she always gets the generic stuff. Tear right through it. But this stuff, oh, that's good.
But while they're talking, he fishes out of her very quickly that exactly what happened on the walk, and that the whole thing, that Nimoy sort of led her to this and everything.
Right. So if he didn't know before, he knows now.
Yeah, I think he's getting there.
Yeah.
And then he goes to talk to Dr. Heidemann, who of course is still in the hospital.
Yep.
He lights up his cigar in a heart patient's
Yeah.
room, and the nurse is rightfully telling him to put it out. But Heidemann's like, it's the only thing human I've smelled in 2 days.
Yeah, I've been sitting here in my own sick and my own filth for near about 2 days, and
that's how it was in the old days.
Yeah.
We didn't have toilets.
We rolled around in our old slop, and sometimes the pigs would come over, and we'd join them, But yeah, he's...
At one time, a board hit my grandson's head, and he was out for days. But he's generally liking to talk to Columbo, and then, of course, Nimoy comes in and totally Bigfoots him.
Yeah, like admonishing, and it's kind of funny, like, again, like, Nimoy's playing like the responsible doctor here, and on the surface, of course, he's got every reason, like, come on, he needs his rest and everything, and sort of raising his voice a little bit and showing professional concern, which, obviously he doesn't want Columbo talking with him, but he has every reason to boot Columbo out of there, or at least limit his exposure there.
And certainly with the cigar.
Yeah, the cigar's a bit much.
Really, I'm surprised people don't complain about that more.
Yeah.
But it was the 70s and everyone was smoking, so
Right.
just used to it. Probably no one could smell anything back then.
Yeah.
Just so much smoke and
Smog.
yeah. And after they leave the room, Columbo gets a page on the PA that he has a phone call, and they've located Harry Alexander. So then he goes to talk to him at his job at a petting zoo, which was a fun
Yeah. It was an
location.
interesting visual. Yeah.
And there's at one point there was like a goat up on a big stump or something.
Yeah.
And so they volunteered at this VA clinic, and actually he was recovering there at first, and they got involved, and then she broke it off because she thought it was because she was helping him with his recovery. They were together. That wasn't healthy.
Yeah.
Or the attachment was unhealthy. But the other thing I found interesting here is that Columbo plays this entirely straight. Like he doesn't seem confused. He doesn't seem any of those Columbo things. He's just talking to him.
Right.
And of course believes him. But it's like the only time until the end of the episode where we see him sort of let down the mask a little bit. Which is, of course, again, not entirely a mask. But again, I think it reinforces the idea that his ability to read people.
Right. And the fact that he identifies more with the underdog, and this is a guy he's got, it's kind of sad because, I mean, it's probably not a great job at this petting zoo, but he expresses concern like, hey, if my boss knew that I had this past, I'd lose the job or whatever. And that seems to, ring true with Columbo, and he feels something for him, I think. He's doing his diligence there, but I don't think he believes that he had anything to do with it. But I think just by sizing him up in a few minutes, he realized, okay, this kid's not a hophead anymore. He's got good intentions. He's not the guy I'm looking for, and I think he seems to feel something for him, which makes later events even more striking because I think you're onto something. I think Columbo plays this differently, and I think he recognizes this is just a working guy trying to live his life right.
Yeah. And that gets reinforced in the next scene where Columbo's back at the hospital in the lab talking to this cleaning lady, and going through the trash.
Yeah.
And the main idea, he finds out there that she was upset after the surgery.
That Sharon was upset.
Sharon was upset,
Right.
Yeah. And then Nimoy comes in, and Columbo's explaining, well, I talked to this guy, there's nothing there. And Nimoy is so dismissive of the idea that, he basically thinks, once a hophead, always a hophead.
Yeah. That's right.
And trying to steer him back there, and of course Columbo's, well, maybe you do.
Yeah.
But, and then, now this is my favorite thing in the episode. So in this lab, there are monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
And Columbo's kind of by a monkey cage, and this monkey reaches out, I think with his, I don't know. He reaches out toward him, and Columbo or Peter Falk, he's like, hey, take it easy, fella.
Yeah.
I rewound that and watched it two or three times at least.
That is funny. Kind of casual about it, yeah.
Yeah, and then that leads to that poor Harry, that Nimoy, he gets some tubes of, I guess, morphine again, breaks into Harry's apartment and waits for him, subdues him with some sort of chokehold.
Yeah, or I think he has an ether-soaked rag, too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He smothers him with this ether-soaked rag.
And then he has his medical bag, and he opens up and he shoots him up.
Yeah.
So I thought Harry was dead already.
Yeah, I did too.
And then we get what I labeled a druggo vision.
Yeah.
As Harry's stumbling around, and there's this layer of liquids and stuff floating all around and on the film, and he walks out his apartment, which is like a motel.
Yeah.
An outdoor
with your own dedicated outdoor entrance, but a cluster of apartments all together. But
and it's cement. He's on the second floor and he falls down the cement stairs.
Yeah, and it's really kind of an awkward fall, but it almost made it look more real. I mean, I think when we were watching it, Lori commented on how it wasn't like a big dramatic fall, but it doesn't have to be a dramatic fall. I mean, that looked like actually something that an actual human being could do. In a way,
Yeah, and then he's in that sprawl of chalk outline sprawl, basically.
Yeah.
So, I assume he's dead.
The entire sequence, even not accounting for the druggo vision, it was very artfully done. The music, again, was very good. The way it was shot, kind of taking advantage of the setting. It's dark, deserted, and kind of quiet. And I did think it was kind of odd that Nimoy, he's pretty well dressed and carrying his doctor's bag, so he kind of takes a chance that nobody sees him.
And he drives a Mercedes.
Yeah, I mean, he's not exactly blending in for a guy that's so calculated, but no, he he does get away with that part of it, and as far as we know, nobody sees him. But it's pretty disturbing. Again, this really kind of elevates it, and we've got this takes him to 2 actual murders and 1 attempted murder that's playing out.
Right, and he just seems so quick to do it.
Yeah.
Well, there's the answer. Like, I don't get the impression that he was thinking about murdering anyone at the beginning of the episode.
No.
Like that he's been harboring this desire to murder his mentor
Yeah.
for a long time and looking for a reason. It's just a reason, if solution presented itself. And even though emotion is driving it, his ambition, the rest of it is very Vulcan in a way.
Yeah.
Well, I need to accomplish this.
Yeah.
This person's in my way. I guess I should do this.
Oh, now, Sharon, I know that Dr. Mayfield always talks about murders and has a book about how to get away with murder and likes murder mysteries. Always said, I'm going to kill somebody one of these days, but that doesn't mean anything.
I know he has those pointy ears.
Yeah.
And, everything is logical, but...
Did you kind of wish that he gave the Vulcan nerve pinch to Harry to subdue him instead of the ether soaked rag?
Yeah, that would have been good.
You know, we shouldn't say that. That's unfair to Leonard Nimoy. I withdraw that statement because he's so good in this episode.
He is, yeah. And it's unfair to Vulcans.
Yeah, it is.
I think in general, Vulcans are not murderers.
No. Nor are they hopheads.
True.
Vulcans are not hopheads.
Maybe when Palm Far comes around, they...
Oh, well, that's a whole other thing.
We do have another scene, Columbo and Nimoy, and Columbo telling him what happened to Harry, and, he's like, well, it's a little odd that, he was right-handed. He'd seen him smoking with his right hand, or left-handed.
Yeah, and the needle mark was in his
left arm.
Like
he thinks most people would use their other hand to shoot up, or use their good hand to shoot in their other arm.
Right.
Makes sense. I mean, when you get a shot, they ask you put it in not your main arm, usually.
Mm-hmm.
And Nimoy even throws out that, what reason could I have for killing her? I did more Shatner than Nimoy there, but... And Columbo's like, you ask tough questions, Doc, and he's like, so does a jury.
Yeah, no, this is where Mayfield's really kind of crossing the line and starting to get really like arrogant about it, and just kind of like being, okay, well, maybe I did it, but you're not gonna prove it.
Yeah, he's a cocky SOB.
Yes,
and then Columbo goes to talk to Heidemann again, and while he's there, he's just like messing around with stuff and some tweezers and
yeah.
But he finds an answer, which is, it says Marcus and Carlson, a medical supplier, and he puts it together. That's Mac.
Yeah. He'd been trying to ask hey, did she know anybody named Mac? And assuming that there was somebody named Mac or nicknamed Mac, and now he knows that's not the case. It's an acronym.
Yeah. And he finds out that she had an appointment with a chemist there, which, he's not sure why, but he goes and talks to someone in the hospital. I'm not sure who that guy is, but...
He's very accommodating, whoever he is.
Yeah. And I think he likes just, educating people. Maybe it's a teaching hospital.
Yeah.
Does have research, so maybe. Yeah. In fact, the exterior, to me, I would have to check. It looked like it might be the same building as the medical center.
Could be. Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Although there are way more people in this hospital.
Yeah.
Medical center.
This is very busy, yeah.
Yeah. But he explains that there are different kinds of suture. That's one of the things they buy. That's the only chemical-based thing they buy from Mac is this is suture, and that there are different kinds. There's dissolving and permanent, and depends on what kind of surgery you want or you're doing. So dissolving is for something that's going to kind of heal on its own, right? Which dissolves in a few days, and permanent is something you want to be permanent. And in the case of a valve replacement, you would always use permanent.
Yeah, you never use dissolving.
Right, because the valve would separate, and that would be bad news.
Yeah.
So Columbo actually goes back to Heidemann and is trying to get him to get someone else to take another look. And, of course, Nimoy comes in, and this time he does, show some anger and, threatens to call Columbo's superiors, as people usually do. And... Columbo asks him about the suture thing, and he explains that, the dissolving, they're different colors.
Yeah, nobody would make that mistake. No doctor would make that mistake. They're totally different colors.
That's right. That would be Bush League.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that, but it would be. And then Columbo follows him to his office and suggests that maybe someone could change the color, dye the stitches, the suture, and Nimoy laughs at him, and he thinks it's foolish, and then Columbo turns. He slams down the coffee pot and says, I know you did it, and I know you're trying to kill this guy.
Yeah, I believe you killed Sharon Martin. I believe you're trying to kill Dr. Heidemann. I mean, he physically leans into him, too. And there's something in Nimoy's face, it changes, slightly. he sort of like flinches a little bit, as we do, I think. It's really kind of a striking moment.
Yeah, it's very intense.
I'm no Columbo expert, but this is one of the only times I remember Columbo actually getting this upset at somebody. I think it's one of the only times he did. It stands out because he almost never does this. Actually, not just getting angry, but showing angry and like slamming that thing down on the desk and kind of like that. He's really kind of lost it. For him, that this is like out of control. He's never like this.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if Nimoy's lack of emotion has created the opposite reaction in him. Just can't handle this like. I mean, his word gets thrown around, but it does seem sort of sociopathic.
Yeah,
and I was going to say that Columbo with Harry, but also his ability to read people is, the opposite is an empathetic quality.
Mm-hmm. And it's possible that Columbo's more upset after what happened to Harry because Columbo actually met Harry, and he's more like human to him. Identifies more with that victim than Sharon even. But I mean, that was one of my big questions of this episode that we could talk about an hour later. And I don't know, but just why did this particular killer infuriate him so much that he lost it? And maybe you've hit on it, just that total coldness. But Mayfield does provoke him by laughing so much, but he does it in a way that there's just something about it. It's just so like evil the way he does it and so arrogant. Like a lot of times it's not like the nervous laughter of somebody that knows they've been revealed. It's almost like a really grating laughter of somebody that still thinks he's better and smarter than Columbo.
Yeah, and he calls him foolish.
Yeah.
Also, to remember, Columbo hasn't been sleeping well.
Yeah.
He's had some stomach issues, some sneezing issues. He's just had a rough couple days.
Yeah. And at this point, Columbo doesn't have the one piece of evidence he needs. He's probably frustrated because he knows it and he hasn't found it yet. Exactly the thing he needs for that gotcha.
Yeah. And yet, this is enough to really, it pushes Nimoy to do the next thing. And maybe that's part of it too. He's seen that every time he gets a little closer, Nimoy immediately turns around and does something. And in this case, he calls, right after Columbo leaves, he calls a nurse's station and finds out to see if afternoon medicines have been given out on Heidemann's floor yet. They haven't. He goes up. They're set out there on a tray, liquid medicines.
Just sitting right out there granted, a hospital is a controlled environment, but it seems like it would be easy just to go walk by and bump them off.
It's like...
Looks a little careless, I guess.
Putting the pan with the handle out.
Yeah.
But, the nurse steps away for just a second, and he pops over and pours something in there, in Heidemann's medicine. And then Heidemann has a reaction, which is what he wants, which is that, we're going to have to go back in, and something's not right, and we're going to have to do the surgery again. And because part of what Columbo said is like, I know this, and if anything happens to him, I'm taking you down.
Right.
So basically, he's going to fix the problem that he created.
Caused.
Yeah.
Right.
And as he's doing the surgery, which again is intense, they cut up to the operating theater, and Columbo's up there watching. Mm-hmm. Which earlier, this is when he was learning about the sutures, he couldn't watch.
Yeah.
And now he's sitting there. Maybe he's just fighting his queasiness,
but yeah, he's watching like a hawk.
Yeah. And then at the end of the surgery, Nimoy looks up again and he's gone. And then Columbo barges in. Of course, he's in a gown and everything, and with doctors and cops, and it's like no one leave, and we're gonna search. And
I think Columbo doesn't even have a cigar, which you can tell it's serious for him,
right?
Because he left the cigar outside,
or his trench coat.
Yeah.
And Nimoy Mayfield gets really angry and sort of grabs and shoves Columbo, and they go back to his office, and Columbo's still got his gown on. He takes it off in the office and throws it on the couch.
Fortunately, he's wearing his clothes under his gown.
Yes.
Just to point that out.
Yeah. And they didn't find anything, and he's upset about it.
Yeah, they had plants actually in the operating room, right? There's somebody, I'm not sure how they pulled this off, but there was at least they had a couple of people observing in the actual operating room itself.
I think there were people, who worked there.
Okay, but he had gone to them and said, "Hey, look for something." I don't think Charlie was involved in this, but I couldn't tell. But a guy actually comes up and confirms, yeah, there's nothing untoward happened here.
Yeah, and Nimoy's playing it very cool again, and at one point brushes his hand through his hair.
Yeah.
Really menacingly. Everything's fine, and Columbo's acting all, well, I don't know. What could have happened?
Yeah.
And then he leaves his office and, shuts the door, and Nimoy relaxes and
kind of looks up and exhales a little bit, and as much genuine emotion as he shows in the episode. And that's perfect because it's not a big gesture, but it's enough you can see weight going off his shoulders and just sighing and allowing himself that moment as a character.
Yeah. And then Columbo comes back in.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever says in this episode, another thing or one more thing.
Yeah, just one more thing.
But he realizes what he already had thought, like, well, you're a surgeon, you're calm and cool and collected and all that stuff, and you blew your top in there, and then he picks up his gown, which he left on the couch, and searches it, and there's the suture that they took out, that Nimoy took out of Heidemann, the dissolving suture, and then that's the end.
Yeah, he says, like, the one thing that we didn't search, was me, and he, smiles a little bit, and probably one of his most satisfying captures ever.
I think so.
Because he was so upset with this guy.
Yeah, rightfully so. So, we've been praising them, but the two of them are just spectacular.
They really were, and just, it's easy to kind of, with the quirks and everything, but Peter Falk, it's easy to, like, and I've said, I've read, like, you can lampoon him with the catchphrases and the gestures and everything, but they're so perfect for the character. I mean, and he's just so good at this. You can always watch him, and again, kind of going to the fact of getting interesting performers to go alongside him. You get people like Nimoy that can hold their own and actually be interesting to watch on screen, even when Columbo's doing whatever he's doing. It doesn't seem like he's consciously trying to upstage other actors. He's doing his thing. You know what his thing is, but you also have whoever the guest star is doing their thing, and they just work so well together. Like, the contrast between them is so great in this episode.
Yeah, and it seems to me that, like, Falk must have appreciated these guys. Because again, the Shatner one or the Dick Van Dyke one too, that kind of, like, two-person scene, it seems to me it requires, like, respect. And for each other's talents and the rhythm of that and everything, because it's like the Shatner one specifically is they're like a comedy team.
Yeah,
this has plenty of humorous moments, but it's not quite that.
I agree. There's a different atmosphere to this episode, I think, because of the way the murders are staged, like we talked about. There's a little bit more edge and tension to this episode. And for me, culminating in that moment where Colombo loses his cool, that really made the episode for me and made it memorable. And I think maybe, like, when I think about Colombo the series, that's one of the Colombo moments that stands out the most. When I first saw this episode, I hadn't seen a lot of Colombo, but I'd seen enough to be familiar with the idea of, okay, Colombo has a certain respect and kinship with whoever he's pursuing, and by the end, he might be comfortable enough to, have a long chat or sit down and, take it easy on the guy, not rough him up, or, have a drink with him or something. So this was totally a contrast to that. And I just remember being jarred the first time I saw it, because, like, whoa, what set him off? This is unusual. And, like, I don't really remember seeing it again. So it really stands out. And Nimoy is worthy. His performance makes the character worthy of getting that singular moment from Columbo, I think.
Yeah. And yeah, he's just so arrogant and smug and all those other words. And,
yeah.
And again, the cold thing, like, just coldly murdering people because they're in his way.
Yeah.
It's almost more disturbing than if he'd lashed out.
Yeah. There's it doesn't seem like, the proverbial crime of passion. There's very few extenuating circumstances, if any. It's really a reprehensible character. Probably a brilliant doctor, though. I give him his credit.
Right, but that makes it disturbing, too.
Yeah.
Because they're people you want to trust and to know how much power you're giving them.
Right. This is not like some of the episodes where, he's going, the murderers are spoiled rich people or people in show business or something like that, where it's easier to kind of, like, look down, and maybe they're more frivolous positions or people that are just wealthy and privileged. Like, well, this character might be wealthy, but he's in a very important profession. I think you're right. I think that ratchets up the tension a little bit, that it's somebody that has lives in his hands, literally, and somebody that we rely on to do good, and somebody's obviously gone horribly wrong.
I definitely want to watch more Columbo.
Yeah.
That's my ultimate conclusion.
Yeah. I can't blame... I think a lot of the episodes, I think in general, it seems like maybe there were episodes in 2-hour time slots and 90-minute time slots. And I think this is one of the 90-minute time slots. I'm not sure how that worked either, like why some of them were longer, or if that was maybe like once a year they did the longer ones. But it seems like in general, I maybe preferred the 90-minute episodes a little bit more. But other than that, I can't think of I can maybe think of like one or two of the 1970s episodes that were disappointing or not as good as the other ones. But almost everyone has something good in it. And it's always entertaining to watch Peter Falk as Columbo. It's just one of the best characters of all time.
And I know there's always talk of like remaking it and rebooting it and stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem necessary. I know at one point like Mark Ruffalo was talking about doing it, and I can see him, if anybody.
Yeah.
I could.
That sounds inspired to me. Like, was it Mark Ruffalo that came up that lobbied for that, or somebody thought of Mark Ruffalo? Because I can actually.
I thought it was like maybe even in development or something,
Wow.
but I could be wrong about that. Maybe he just mentioned it. But yeah, I could definitely see him, and especially like I don't think he would do an impression, but he's got enough of the same qualities.
You could see him with that similar type of energy.
Yeah, being kind of rumpled and
Yeah.
like that part of it. But like I don't think he would. It would be like Kevin Pollak. Like he would be talking like, you know.
No, I could see him putting like I think he would put his own like spin on it, so there would be a quirky but distinct character. But man, that's a tough one to do because Colombo is such a great character. It'd be very, very difficult to pull that off to everybody's satisfaction. But I would watch it.
I think I would watch that, and I wouldn't really want it on HBO or anything either. Like I enjoyed the recent Perry Mason thing on HBO, but I don't think Columbo needs to be mature. It's already mature enough.
No, and I think actually maybe in some of the '90s episodes they maybe sort of tried to push the envelope a little bit that way, and I don't think they're quite as successful. I just don't think the writing was as good as it was in the '70s episodes. But yeah, I agree with you. I'd like to see just somebody do like a procedural like this, not a whodunit, but get them, however you want to call it, inverted whodunit, or this person done it and we're going to get them kind of thing. Just do it straightforward, and this is the kind of show you could do within the limitations of broadcast television and still have it be interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Or I would accept maybe, well, no, because in terms of language, basic cable is pretty much let the doors open now. But
yeah,
and not that you have to. I mean, you could be on basic cable and not. You could be on HBO and not do all that stuff.
You could almost see like a TNT or FX do it, and maybe one of the more advantages rather than like content would be maybe the ability to do like one movie a month or something like that, as opposed to, okay, we're going to do 60-minute episodes and let's do like 13 of these and show them every week. It might be better to let them breathe and do like a series of specials as opposed to a weekly series. And maybe it would be easier to do that on cable or premium cable or streaming.
Yeah, although I was thinking earlier when you were explaining the wheel idea that maybe some network should try that again as a way to, because part of the lure of premium TV for movie actors is the limited number of episodes. And
right.
That maybe a network needs to try that as a way to get some bigger names, but they only have to do 7 episodes.
Yeah.
So they still get their 22 episodes to fill out the schedule, but they have three or four different shows doing it.
I wonder if maybe it would be difficult with the finances because the way finances work now and deficit financing to make a series, maybe they'd be worried that it would take too long to get their money back, or it'd be difficult to sell it to another outlet. I don't know, but I would be intrigued by that idea. When they brought back Columbo in the 90s, they did it as part of like at first I think as part of like another wheel kind of thing on ABC.
Right.
They had your boy Burt Reynolds as B.L. Stryker. Well,
you're everyone.
True. And I think the other one was Lou Gossett Jr. and Gideon Oliver. Those didn't quite work as well as Columbo, I don't think. But it seems to me, there's room for that concept. I'm only guessing that there's some economic reason that they don't do it. But the broadcast television, the way it is now, it seems like they should at least try something. And why not? If you're going to go back to the well, which seems all the rage now, as we know, like reboots and using recycling concepts, maybe combine it with a more innovative model, and this would be again kind of going back to the future because it's already been done, but at least it would be something that not everybody else is doing, and it would maybe make the program stand out a little bit more. But
I got one last thing, a personal Columbo story. So I spent a semester of college in England, and beforehand, my college gave us a list of things you needed, and they said it like a raincoat or some sort of winter coat, raincoat, and my dad seemed put out by the idea that we needed this at all. But he and my mom went to some outlet store, and they ended up going to a London Fog outlet, and they brought home this coat, and it was basically a Columbo coat.
Nice.
And it had a lining that you could add to it, so it could be a winter coat, and it seemed a little ridiculous at the time. Why did they get this? So then, I had to wear it a lot there. Mm-hmm. So the school, which is an extension of the college I went to, is like a manor house, and they have some British people working there. Apparently, they referred to me as Columbo.
Wow.
I learned this later, near the end of the semester. But And I didn't really, I didn't interact with them a lot other than, I think, to get packages or something. And I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, it seems like a compliment in a way.
Yeah.
But was it just the coat, or was I slovenly looking? Probably. I mean, I didn't talk like Colombo, but...
Well, I would hope it was more on the outfit rather than a general boorishness that they picked up on. I don't think that was it.
Right. I certainly wasn't bending their ear about my stomach ailments.
Yeah, that's good.
But, being a person who sometimes nicknames people I don't really know based on some minor aspect of their personality, I know that that's not always a positive thing.
Yeah. Well, Columbo in itself is not a derogatory thing, but I can understand some unease with being labeled so glibly.
Yeah. But, now I'm going to take it as a compliment, I think, because I like him so much.
Sounds good to me.
I don't think I'm as smart as him. I don't think I could solve murders.
Well, I'm not sure who is as smart as him. I would like to see a Batman versus Columbo, or Batman Columbo team up would be cool. Like, two of the smartest detectives of all time.
I think just Columbo questioning him a lot about his choices.
Yeah.
So you dress up as a bat, right?
Yeah. Columbo Bruce Wayne scenes would be great.
Yes, Columbo working out at Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, Columbo going to like some Wayne charity event, like some fancy wingding, and like cornering him and just drilling him with these seemingly innocuous questions.
Yeah.
That is what I want to see. I want to see Columbo and Batman.
And with that, I think we should freeze the frame here, end the episode, kill some. No.
Wait a minute. I got just one more thing, Mike.
Oh yeah.
No, actually, I don't. I think actually everything's been resolved pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah. This episode brought to you by Marcus and Carlson Medical Supplies. Mac to you, bub. This episode also brought to you by Something for an Upset Stomach. This episode also brought to you by Arched Eyebrows. You can say so much with so little. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.